Hello everyone, for those who've been following my channel, you'll see that I've recently finished Batman Arkham Origins, so I thought I'd give a little review on it. For those who don't know, Batman Arkham Origins is the third game in the Arkham series, but is a prequel, so it takes place way before all of them, including Asylum. It was developed by WB Montreal instead of Rocksteady, so it was kind of like, the B team while they were working on Arkham Knight, and originally came out in 2013 for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, PC, and I think even Wii U, but who gives a shit about that? Am I right? I played it though on the PlayStation 4 using PlayStation Now. That definitely did impact my experience, so there's a little disclaimer there because if you don't know, PlayStation Now is a streaming service, so I had to deal with input lag and my own internet connection failing sometimes. It's also not remastered, so it looks and feels like a 2013 game, unlike the other entries in the series, which are either a bit more recent or have been remastered. And then on top of that, I didn't get to play the DLCs, including Cold Cold Heart, which I'm very disappointed because I've heard good things about, but they're just not available on PS4. I have heard the PC version is great, so if you're going to play it, I recommend playing that one. Our story begins 2 years into Batman's career. A riot has been started at Blackgate by Black Mask, so you go over there to deal with it. Black Mask is leaving at the end of it in a chopper, and who stays behind is Killer Croc. You beat the crap out of him, and he tells you about these assassins Black Mask has hired for a bounty of 50 million on your head. Obviously there's Killer Croc, then there's Deathstroke, Firefly, Copperhead, Deadshot, Electrocutioner, Shiva, and Bane. All of this knowledge you find out through a drone, so you're like, who's the one recording that drone? You find out that's the Penguin through an arms deal one of his goons is doing, so you go and meet him on his boat. There you fight the Electrocutioner and Deathstroke before you beat the shit out of Penguin, get the info you want from him. He tells you that Black Mask is dead. So you head over to the crime scene, you find his girlfriend dead, and someone who appears to be Black Mask, but obviously things are a bit fishy, so we head to GCPD, break in. Most of the cops, not a big fan of us, but one person, Barbara Gordon, likes our tech, so she just lets us do whatever we want, and we find out that someone actually killed a doppelganger that Sionis was using, and has kidnapped him to take him to the Gotham Merchants Bank. That person turns out to be the Joker, because, spoiler, Black Mask isn't actually the villain of this game, and Black Mask has been taken to the steel mill, so we go there to try and get some more info out of him, but before we can do that, Copperhead interferes, and we have to fight her, but Black Mask has fucked off, so we've got to figure out a different way. Luckily, Electrocution has shown back up, and his gloves emit an electromagnetic charge that we can track. So we track him to the Royal Hotel, where we find the Joker and Bane. We fight Bane, but then Joker's like, I'm a bit bored, I want to blow this building up, so we have to save him. And he's like, why would anyone save me? So we send him to Blackgate, where he meets Harleen Quinzel and talks a little bit about his origin. After that, not a lot of leads at first, but we find out that there's a dead body resembling one of Bane's goons in GCPD, so we break back in. It's one of Bane's goons. We find out about a new drug called Titan, and we also manage to track Bane's tracker. But on the way, Firefly is burning down a bridge, so we have to deal with him, which we do, but then Bane kills Alfred. Psych! We resuscitate him. He's perfectly fine. But then we find out that Joker's caused a riot at Blackgate, like what happened at the beginning of the game. So we go over there, deal with that, and then Joker's like, here's the thing, Batman. Either I'm gonna die because I'm in an electric chair hooked up to Bane's heartbeat, or you're gonna kill him so I don't die, or he's gonna kill you. Either way, someone's gonna die. So, we kill Bane. Psych! We resuscitate Bane. And he's not a big fan of that, so he jumps himself with some Titan, so we have to beat the shit out of him again. And then we head over to the Joker, who's sitting in the prison church, beat the crap out of him, and then we're done with Batman Arkham Origins. That's pretty much the entire story, you'll notice some of the assassins weren't part of it, because they were a part of side missions instead. Overall, I have to say I'm not the biggest fan of the story which was told in this game. I feel like there were pieces which, if they had a bit more development or a different way to go about it, it would have gone a lot better. But the twist that Black Mask wasn't the main villain, it was Joker, was very poor in my opinion, and just shows what is a weakness with Batman stories in general, where they don't trust the other villains to be able to sell well and carry a story as the Joker does. So they always just make every story a Joker story when there's so many other good villains who could take their place. The Assassin's angle was interesting at first, but then you realize there's 8 people and they don't get the same sort of like screen time. 2 of the assassins, Deadshot and Lady Shiva, weren't even part of the main story. They both had very short side quests, and Lady Shiva's was a very bad side quest, which didn't show off the fact that she is the best fighter in the DC universe, at least in like the 99.9 percentile or whatever. It didn't really show that off. It was just like, oh, she's kind of like a ninja, I guess, and she doesn't agree with Batman. Well, so does every fucking villain in Batman games. Like, they don't really agree with his philosophy. I did like the bit where the Joker tried to challenge Batman's philosophy, and I liked a lot of the Joker and Batman, like, relationship parts. Like, the parts where it was just them two, and it showed a bit more of the connection between them. Plus, I liked the look at the Joker's origins for a little bit, because it was still a bit questionable. It wasn't like, this is exactly who the Joker is. It's like, this is a little bit of what happened beforehand. But really, I would have liked it more if maybe, because obviously it was a prequel, and that means there's some limitations, and you can't go too risky with it, because you could risk doing something which doesn't make sense in continuity. So, for example, when Bane attacked Alfred and you have to resuscitate him, you know that Alfred's not going to die, because he's in the later games. Same with when you have to kill Bane or Joker would die. You know Bane or Joker aren't going to die, because they're in later games. If there were a bit more of the lesser known ones put into the spotlight a bit more, so for instance, you know, Deathstroke, Firefly, Copperhead, and Electrocutioner were all like new to the series, you could have maybe gotten some more who weren't used that much, like maybe, I don't know, like Catman, Prometheus, or whatever. Like, there's so many villains in the Batman Rogues Gallery. You could have gone for more, but it just kind of ended up being, this is the Bane and Joker show. And even like Black Mask got shafted hard by getting sent from being the main villain to a very shit side quest. Then on top of that, I feel like the characters themselves, some of them, obviously not everyone knows about Batman, and most think he's a myth and everything. And you've got the stuff which you expect, like Jim Gordon doesn't agree with him at first, but then he comes around. But like Barbara felt a bit too naive. She was just like, oh, you got cool tech, okay, I'll let you into this highly secure server to do whatever the fuck you want. And Harleen Quinzel, I know she's meant to be naive, but she felt ultra naive, because she had one cutscene where Joker just talks about how, oh, he's like, really feels like Batman gets him without, you know, saying Batman. And she's just like, oh, I'm so lonely that I think you're my best friend now. And it's like, couldn't you spread that out over a little, like a passage of time? So there was a passage of time from him being put into Blackgate before and to the riots. So in between that, you could probably add another cutscene and then had her be all like, oh yeah, I agree with everything you're doing. Let me be a villain as well later on. But that didn't happen. Overall, it just felt a bit very safe, and most of the interesting parts didn't get enough screen time. It was mostly just Bane and Joker, which are very good, and they are definitely the highlights of the story, but that's because they're the only like prominent parts, really. And everything else, like Copperhead shows up for like a copy-pasted fight from Arkham City, and that's it. Then she's gone forever. Like, wow. Could have definitely used some work. Aside from the main story, Batman Arkham Origins also includes an open world with a load of side quests in it. This open world consists of 2 islands. One I think has 4 districts and the other has 3, and then a bridge which connects the 2. It also uses a lot of assets from Arkham City, which isn't that bad. The only problem is 95% of the memorable places are places from Arkham City. The Ace Chemicals building, the courthouse, Penguin's museum and the area around it, and the steel mill. All of that comes from Arkham City. The only memorable part I think I can really recognize from Arkham Origins Edition is the bridge and the GCPD. And one of them is the GC fucking PD. Like, of course that's going to be memorable, especially considering I think it's the place you go to most in the story. And the bridge connects the 2 islands, and there's no other way to get past the 2 islands without using fast travel. Which brings me on to my next point, which is traversal in the open world fucking sucks. Everything feels so slow because it feels... I don't know if it's bigger than Arkham City, but the layout makes it feel like it's bigger than Arkham City. Because the layout of Arkham City was fairly smart. Like, it wasn't that big, but that Wonder Tower, which made you have to go around, made it feel a bit bigger, but everything was all close together. There was always things to grapple onto, and you didn't feel like you're going that slow, especially when you got the grapple accelerator. You had the grapple accelerator in Batman Arkham Origins, but for some reason I just felt really slow most of the time. It didn't help with the bridge, where there wasn't a lot of places to grapple onto, and going over that a lot was not fun, and I'll tell you that. It was very long and unnecessary. And then a lot of the other buildings added in just inconspicuously have areas you can't grapple off, and it always feels like the next grapple bit is probably like a little bit too far away, and it just makes you feel like traversing the entire open world is very slow. So instead you start using fast travel a lot, which, I mean, I'm glad it's there because the map needed it, but I'd rather the map was made better so that the fast travel wasn't needed. Obviously, just traversing the open world isn't all the open world has in it. There are obviously side quests and activities to do. For side quests, not a lot stands out. The Deadshot encounter was nice, but it was one Arkham City style tracing him of, he shot a guy at Ricochet to hit a plane, and that was it. And then you go and have a fight with him, but the fight was a lot better than the Arkham City one because you could sneak about, and if he just heard even a slight noise, he would ricochet and hit you instantly, so you had to be ultra stealthy to take him out, which was a lot better than the Arkham City one, which was just get underneath him and take him down and you're done, because you had to do a takedown a couple of times. The Anarchy one stood out a bit because you go from place to place defusing bombs, but you got to beat up a load of people beforehand, so you're on a time limit, and then the actual fight, you fight a bunch of his goons, and he's throwing Molotovs at you, and then he jumps down, and you beat the shit out of him as well. But then everything else kind of just, it didn't really work as well. Bird was like, you go and do a couple of gang fights, and then you find him, and he's just a goon, and so are the rest of the people with him in a club, and you beat the shit out of them, and you're done. Black Mask has drug stashes, which are basically the Bane Venom stuff from, Titan, from Arkham City, where you just go around and blow them up. So you go around and blow them up, then you fight Black Mask in church, and he's just a guy with a bunch of other guys. Like, not much to it. Lady Shiva does one thing where she's like, here's a corrupt cop, and he's above, like, an electrical bit of water. Let him die. But then it's like, gives you a really easy way to turn off the electricity and get him down safely. And then you just fight her, and she's just a knife ninja dude, and then a martial artist dude. And that's it. Like, not much to it at all. Penguin has you run around, disarm some gun crates, and you're done. Once again, not much to it. And then there's random crimes which happen around the place, so you have to go and investigate them using the whole detective sense, which are interesting, but then all the culprits aren't. They're just random people who you just arrest, and then you're done. The only interesting one was when a cop ran over a criminal in front of GCPD. And that's like the only one I found interesting. They could have been used, like, instead of doing time for those, take those kind of things and make them into more Deadshot victims, so you can extend the Deadshot story a bit longer. But other than that, most of the side quests in this game, apart from Deadshot and Anarchy, were very lackluster. Quick side note, there was one other side quest which was actually pretty good, I forgot about because it was also very short, but the Mad Hatter one, it wasn't as good as the Arkham City or the Arkham Knight version, but it was just it was similar to kind of like the Scarecrow stuff from Arkham Asylum, just not as good because there wasn't much of a threat. It was mostly just going from point A to point B, but was more interesting than a lot of the other side quests out there. A little disclaimer here. Now, you haven't done all the Enigma stuff in Batman Arkham Origins. I did all the Riddler stuff in every other Arkham game, but I couldn't be fucked in Arkham Origins because there are only data packs, which were the Riddler trophies from other games, and a whole load of relay network, like tower things which you had to blow up, which were just like challenges in other games, like in Arkham City. Sorry, there was like some balloons around steel mill you could pop. There were like some cameras you could destroy, but there was like 10 or so in an area. Here, there's like fucking 15 of them in each district, and it's just more tedium alongside the already kind of tedious data packs. And then on top of that, there were no riddles. The riddles are, for me, the best part about the Riddler. Like, in the games is what I mean. I mean, obviously, it's like all what the Riddler does, but the stuff where you go around and scan little, like, Easter eggs, which are tied to, like, comic books, and even some people from other comic books, like, there was, like, Lex Luthor and Flash in some of them, but all these little, like, comic book Easter eggs you could figure out, and even if you didn't know them, you could interrogate a guy and it would show up on the map, so you just go there and scan it. But it was a bit more interesting than just doing these like basic challenges where it's like touch all these buttons without touching the floor, or hit all these switches in 5 seconds or whatever. And it also, like, not just gave a bit of variety, but also gave some like life into the world, which is what I feel like the actual city was lacking, because once again, all the memorable stuff was from Arkham City. I don't remember any like billboards for Harvey Dent or whatever before he's like Two-Face, you know, or I don't know, some advert for Jonathan Crane's psychiatric work or whatever. Like, just give us something, just a little bit, you know. But it didn't, so I never bothered with finishing all the Enigma stuff. Coming off Arkham City, the gameplay was very similar to that which was found in Arkham City. You punch some dudes, your combo comes up, you counter some dudes when they try and hit you, you dodge them if you can't counter them, you stun them if you need to stun them. Pretty simple. There were some gadgets thrown in there. For the most part, they were the same as Arkham City, but there were 3 new gadgets. The remote claw, which I heard people say was overpowered in Predator sections, but I never upgraded it to that point. I think apparently you can just take out like 3 guys for free with it, which sounds really good, but I just did Predator normally, which is, you know, just drop down, stealth take down someone, put down explosive gel on a wall, jump into a grate, go on a gargoyle, whatever. So aside from when it was needed in like, oh, the only way you can traverse this place is by using a remote claw, I didn't really use it. Then there were the electric gloves, which I used a lot because they're great. You beat people up and then they get charged up. Every hit you do adds 2 to your combo instead of 1, and they just do more damage. There's no reason not to use them. If a guy's got armor on, you don't need to stun them beforehand. You just whack, 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 whack. You can punch through shields and electric batons. Most of the nuance just goes out the window. You just do whatever the fuck you want and beat the shit out of everyone. while the charge is up, and it's fairly easy to charge up. Really, every fight you could get an electric glove charge. And then the last gadget was absolutely fucking useless. It was a concussion detonator. The concussion detonator, Alfred goes like, "Oh, you should use this instead of beating the shit out of the cops because you don't want to give them brain damage." But then it doesn't even take them out. It just kind of like stuns them a bit, and they like walk around swinging. And the only reason to ever use it was for combo variety. That's it. It pretty much did nothing. It might take someone out of the fight for a little bit, but they're still swinging around, and they get a bit more erratic than usual. So I just felt like, aside from points where I've just tried to use it, see if I could figure out a way to make it good, it never felt like it was worthwhile, and was quite frankly a disappointment of an added gadget. Also, the disruptor was technically different than it was in Arkham City. In Arkham City, it was like a little switch where you could just, from afar, activate it and disable whatever. But in this, it was more of like a gun. But the thing is, it had like a projectile which could hit walls or could like drop off or whatever and actually miss the target, which made it worse than it was in Arkham City, and definitely much worse than the much improved version in Arkham Knight, and was pretty much useless, so I never really used it, and that's why I kind of forgot about it. On top of this, for the normal combat, they added one enemy type, and I wish they never did, because it sucked, and it didn't show up again in Arkham Knight, and I'm so glad it didn't. It's the martial artist. The martial artist will attack you, and you have to hit counter twice, but sometimes, even when you hit counter twice, you don't counter his attack, and he just stands there, and you have to stand there and counter like 5 attacks in a row before you actually counter it. And when you attack them, they can counter your attack, so you've got to counter their counter. It screws with the flow of things a lot, and sometimes, even when you're doing like the fucking 5 counters a row or whatever, your combo just drops for some reason. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. It ruins the flow, and it just makes combat annoying, especially when there's like 2 or more of them. Electric gloves make it easy because you can just whack them and then they'll go down pretty quick. I don't think they've got that much health. They tend to go down a bit quicker than most of the others, but they're just an annoyance, really, and they just ruin the flow of combat. A very, very poor addition. I mentioned Predator a bit earlier. Mostly the same as usual. Remote Claw apparently makes it great. I didn't use it that much, so I can't really talk much about it. But there was another thing I can talk about, which I think is level design in Predator sections. There's a lot of like grates near corners, and the button combination to go into a grate is the same one as to attach to a corner. I did this a lot, and it was infuriating when I needed a quick escape into a grate, and I couldn't, and I would just get shot. I also heard that some of the gargoyles are placed wrong, so you can't even get inverted takedowns properly because the guard's patterns don't go under the gargoyle properly. And it just feels like there's a lot of very minor like annoyances in the level design, which kind of just adds up over time, which makes Predator sections just a ball ache, really. Finally, I can't talk about gameplay or Batman Arkham Origins in general without approaching what people say is the best part about this game, and that's the boss fights. Here's my ranking of them on screen now, but I'll just go through them really quick. Number 1, I've got Deathstroke. I think it was definitely the best out of the bunch. Then Deadshot. Then the TN1 Bane, Firefly, Killer Croc, Copperhead, Electrocutioner, who was a joke fight, so basically anything below that I think was crap, which is all the Bane fights apart from the TM1 Bane fight, Anarchy, Black Mask, Shiva, and finally Bird. Bird, Shiva, Black Mask, and Anarchy are all kind of just like you fight normal people. So that's why they're all the way down there. Anarchy's better than the rest because he at least like throws Molotovs down. And I put Shiva below Black Mask because I feel like it didn't really represent what she should be. Like she should have had more. So, I kind of put her there. The normal Bane fights, I think, are very poorly made. He charges at you like a big guy does. You have to dodge out the way, but he can trap you in a corner like indefinitely, and throughout the fight he just gets goons around him, which isn't that big of a deal, apart from when you try to dodge his charge and you do one of the little dodge over a guy, but then you don't go far enough because it's not as far as a normal dodge, and Bane hits you anyway, and you do this for a ridiculously long time. You have to rip out his venom a bunch and then beat the shit out of him normally, then he gets more venom, so you just keep on doing it. It's very, very poor boss fight. Electrocutioner, joke fight, it's funny, whatever, we're done. Copperhead was copy and paste from Ra's al Ghul's fight in Arkham City, well, part of it, and probably one of the worst parts. No, not actually. It was an alright part of the Ra's al Ghul fight, but they made it worse by making it really dark and also making you under the effects of poison. But it's alright. It was a good fight in Arkham City, and it's still a good fight in Arkham Origins. It's just nothing new, really. Killer Croc was an easy first fight, but it was interesting enough. You just beat shit out of him, and then he picks up an explosive, and you throw a batarang at it, and it blows up. There's the fight for you. Firefly, you dodge his fire, and then you hit him with a glue grenade, and hit him with a bunch of batarangs, and then you try and backclaw him, and just punch him while he's on the ground. You just do that a lot. It wasn't my favorite. Mostly because they try to get you to like hide behind cars to dodge the fire attack at the beginning. Like, that's what they insinuate, but it's really finicky and doesn't work very well. It's just better to just dodge it, really, which made the fight a bit easier when I got to that. The TM1 Bane is kind of like a worse version of the Mr. Freeze fight in Arkham City, which isn't much of a knock considering I think that is the best fight in the entire series. But it's kind of like you've got to stealth attack him so that you can make him vulnerable to some attacks. And there's these electrified gates all around the arena, which if you stealth attack him nearby, you'll throw him into, which do more damage, which was interesting. But he doesn't like learn like Mr. Freeze does. So you can just do the same one again and again. You can do similar things. And then partway through an alarm goes off and you're meant to hit this thing with the disruptor, but for some reason it was just really awkward for me to do it, and Bane just kept on popping up, so I just didn't give a shit about it. I'm like, whatever, I'll leave the jammer on, I'll have this annoying ass alarm blaring through, I'll just beat the shit out of him, who cares. Deadshot I went over before, much better than the Arkham City one. The ricochet stuff was nice, it meant you had to be silent, and, you know, he didn't go down in one takedown, so that was nice. Deathstroke was the best out of the bunch. He had some things, like, taken from the Ra's al Ghul fight, but he added a lot of his own, and it was just kind of it's what Lady Shiva should have been. It was two very good fighters, like, fighting each other. You have to counter him a lot, and he counters you, so you have to counter his counters. It was like the martial artist, but one-on-one, so it didn't ruin the flow of combat, because it's just you and him. You don't have to deal with everyone else. And then he eventually starts throwing stuff with the remote claw, but you just, like, catch it and throw it back at him. One of probably about top 5 all-time Batman Arkham fights, but I think overall most of the boss fights in this game weren't that good. It was either just normal people or copied and pasted things. It was only really the top 3, maybe even put Firefly in there, and Killer Croc maybe. So the top 5 were good, and the top 3 were kind of just like the ones which stood out a lot. But I feel like there were others in the series which had an overall better run of boss fights, in my opinion. Overall, for my first playthrough, I found Batman Arkham Origins to be, you know, a fun enough game. I did rag on it quite a bit, but I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's a fairly good game. I just think when it comes to the Arkham series, it's not as good as the rest. The story was, you know, overall pointless and was a bit disappointing. Had a lot of good ideas which weren't, you know, acted upon fully in favor of having the Joker again. Some parts of the combat and like gameplay, even though they were like same as we had before, but like level design and stuff, made it just a little bit more infuriating. Most of the side quests felt pointless. Enigma felt worse than usual, and I usually don't even think that the Riddler stuff is that bad. Like, I'm fine with going around getting all the Riddler trophies and stuff, but this was just only tedium. That was it with Enigma. There was nothing interesting about him. So I just didn't bother. The gadgets were either overpowered or useless, and I'm pretty sure none of them came back except for, I mean, technically the Disruptor did, but that was already there before, and it got improved massively. But overall, I think it was a fine game. I think if you want to play it, you should play it on the PC version, and you should also definitely try out Cold Heart, because I've heard only good things about it, and it includes Mr. Freeze, who's one of the best Batman villains ever. But overall, I think I give this 3 out of 5. A good solid game, but you can miss it if you want. You can just play the other 3 games in the trilogy. It doesn't matter that much. But anyway, thank you guys for watching and listening to my little review on Batman Arkham Origins. I think I'm going to do this when I finish a game from now on. Nice little way to reflect on it and just give my final thoughts on a game. And if you want to watch the entirety of my playthrough of Batman Arkham Origins, there's a playlist linked on screen now and will be linked in the description as well.